All right. So this is kind of fun. I don't usually do the podcast on video. And this is a super fun bonus episode to the Transforming Anxiety podcast. There is a video version. If you're listening to the audio of this, you can find it over at the website, kellyhanlonmccormick.com/podcast. We'll go to the podcast page. I'm not exactly sure what this will be. /bonus yoga, maybe. Let's just say that. /bonus yoga. Um, but I have a very, very special guest. The first time I've done a guest and an interview on the podcast. This is my yoga teacher, James Miller. James and I have known each other and been working together, I think, for about 6 years now. I think
That
that's
sounds about right. I can't quite remember. I remember
something
the
like that,
event. I don't remember the year. Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. I'm judging by how old my kids are, so I think that's about right. But James has such an exciting announcement and so much to share. And I just thought, as somebody who talks about movement a lot and the importance of movement in really transforming and healing from anxiety, but really just dealing with any of our emotions, anxiety, stress, or anything else that's going on. This is such a natural, perfect topic. It's such a natural, perfect service that he provides that just dovetails so nicely with the work that we do here. So, James, welcome to the show. That's the first time I've ever said that. It's so fun.
Well, get used to it. I am so honored to be your first guest. I've always wanted to be on your podcast. I wasn't even aware that you didn't have guests. So, yeah, it's an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much.
So we are going to dive in, James. And we talked about this a little bit before we started. We're going to skip the whole who's who, how did we meet stuff. I figure if you guys are really interested in digging into James's background and how he came into the world of yoga and all of that, it's out there. You can find it. That stuff is readily available. And he's making his site even more informative and sharing more and more of his story and blog posts and videos and everything. So that's out there for you guys to find if you're really interested in digging in. I thought today we would talk about, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what adamantine is and introduce everybody to the concept and the style behind adamantine. And then we're going to talk about how that plays into the world of anxiety and just how it works with us in dealing with our emotions and transforming our lives. So let's start with a little bit about adamantine as a style.
Okay. That's such a big question to the person who created it.
Right?
It's a series of postures that are designed to maximize the mobility of the human body, but not just to impact the body, but to impact us on all other levels, because all these different levels of who we are reflect, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So it's a way of organizing the body at an optimum level. And I think one of the key things that makes adamantine different is it's empowering. So, we're here talking about this today because, we're bringing adamantine yoga online for the first time. We're trying to empower people at home to have a very authentic, legitimate practice that they can do for themselves in their own home environment. So it's the kind of practice someone can take with them wherever they go, and they can practice wherever they want, whenever they want.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that's one of the big differences that we see. Yoga's not a foreign concept anymore, right? We have yoga studios everywhere. Many, many, many people have been to a yoga class in some capacity, whether it was at the gym, whether it was at a yoga studio, whether they did some sort of pop-up thing you can find these all over the place. So people are becoming more and more familiar with yoga, but we're definitely on to something completely different with the style of adamantine yoga. And what you said about really empowering people to take this practice and make it their own is the key to it, right?
Right. And consistency in your own personal practice is key. And one of my criticisms of modern yoga is it's always kind of bred a tourist attitude towards it. You take a class once in a while, you do yoga when it's offered in the park, but that really doesn't dive into the true power of the practice. When you have a relationship with the practice and it's a daily thing for you, that's when it really becomes transformative. And that's when it can really, help you overcome things like anxiety. So I
That's such a
think,
great point. The consistency. This is something I talk about a lot on the podcast. It's something I work with my clients a lot with, that this is not a one and done. right? Whether we're talking about yoga, whether we're talking about diet, whether we're talking about quality sleep, whether we're talking about quality relationships and how you feel about the work that you're doing, how you're taking care of your finances, consistency across the board is the key to all of it, right? You can't have one salad and be like, well, that's done, right?
Absolutely. Right. Right.
Yeah.
When I think of it, in a yoga practice, in like a practice like Adamantine, you can almost create a forum for practicing or rehearsing certain situations you have in life. And when I think about the physical symptoms that relate to anxiety, elevated heart rate, shortness of breath, scattered thoughts, you can create a forum in your yoga practice where you're consciously working in that same environment on those same types of skills that you're going, it's almost like you're rehearsing for reminding yourself later in the day when those anxious moments come up, how to work with the tools and techniques you have available to you to overcome those situations.
Yeah, that's a great point. I find in the one-on-one conversations I'm having with clients, we have this very safe space, this kind of playground to kind of play with thoughts and emotions and
Mhm.
examine them with a different perspective than when we're living them out. The same is very much true when you're on your yoga mat, right? That it gives
Exactly.
you a
That's what I
place.
think.
Yeah, it
Hmm.
gives you a place to experience a lot of that and to I always talk about kind of putting yourself in the position of like the scientist, right? And this is all just a science experiment. Like, can you just observe it? Can you get really curious about it and see
Hmm.
what's going on for you? And then instead of being so attached to that data and the effects of what's happening, instead, could you use that as a tool of self-awareness, right? As a tool of
Hmm.
understanding and of knowledge. And yoga is the exact same thing.
It's essentially what it is. It's just a physical, movement-based way of going about the same thing. And you get
Yeah.
these side effects at the same time. You get healthier and you feel better, and all of these positive things happen. But at its core, it's really a mindfulness practice.
Completely. I don't know if I've told you this, but I got certified in life coaching maybe right before, kind of overlapped at about the same time I got certified with you as a yoga teacher. And you and my teacher, Brooke Castillo, don't know each other. And at the time, there was no avenue for either of you to really get to know one another unless she moved to Des Moines or unless you got certified as a life coach. Now you're both much more public and could see each other's teachings a lot more. But it was so fascinating to have these two completely unrelated people in a life coaching industry and in the yoga industry telling me the exact same stuff. It was bizarre. It was bizarre in a very cool way. It was like, I think we're onto something here with the modalities of utilizing yoga and utilizing managing your mind, cleaning up your mind as tools for real transformation.
Right. And I think for you, it probably kind of brought two worlds together, because I know you well enough to know that you had a background in movement, and tying in the
Yes.
movement with the understanding of what's happening inside mentally. It's powerful stuff. So it probably was just a perfect fit for you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the timing, just, it was really fun. Very
Right.
cool. So, okay, let's get into, we've talked a little bit about adamantine, and I want to underscore the point that adamantine is a sequence of postures. There's 20 poses in the sequence. They all have modifications. So it is all designed to meet you exactly where you're at, whether you're brand new, whether you're a seasoned veteran with yoga, whether you've been practicing consistently, whether wherever you're at, right? I'm coming off of a head cold. I've had a very modified practice the past few days. But it meets you where you're at every single day, but it is the same thing every single day. So there's a consistency to it that gives you a true barometer for measuring. I use this all the time that it's like, where am I at? How am I feeling? Let me move through my yoga practice and I'll be able to tell you better after I've practiced than I could going into the practice.
Right. No two practices are really the same because we're always different. So it's always
Always.
about using this tool to kind of reorganize yourself in a higher level so you can meet the day at that kind of elevated state. So I'm so surprised by my practice. And when I show up at the mat, I kind of don't know what to expect. But eventually, when you know the sequence really well, and that's what our training is designed to do, is to help people really understand how to modify their practice. you have all of these different tools that you can adapt based upon what's happening that day. I mean, I don't know about you, but we're speaking, just days after the holiday. And definitely, celebratory eating and celebratory drinking affect people so much that they step to the mat and things are different, but you have all these tools to basically up your practice to your needs for that day, which I think is a little different than just following along with what somebody tells you to do in a group class, or even online in a video that's not designed for you individually.
Completely. And I have a little bit of a different experience than a lot of the people in your studio. So far, how long has the studio been open? How many years?
This particular studio has been about 5 years.
Yeah. So you have quite a contingency of people who've been coming to the studio regularly, a lot of them since you've opened, right? Many,
Right.
many regulars that have been around for years and years. You and I met, I live 3 hours south of James. He's based in Des Moines. So if anybody listening is around the Des Moines area, you lucky duck. I'm in Kansas City. And so I haven't had the experience of being in the studio daily. And I've been a sort of haphazard guinea pig anyway for what's possible when you take this on the road, when you practice away from the studio, when you commit to it consistently. Because I do practice every single day. And we've joked that, before putting into place the online video coaching aspects that we're going to talk about today and that you're going to be launching here in 2020, I probably would have up-leveled my practice a little bit quicker in the studio, or had we started some of the online stuff sooner. But it's
Right.
super fun to see now as, a practitioner who isn't local, who doesn't get to work with you every day, what's really possible.
Right. Well, the studio environment is very exciting, but the real discovery I've had since beginning this kind of journey of bringing Adamantine online is how powerful video is as a teaching tool. It's honestly, in some ways, I actually believe you can learn yoga more effectively through video. And that's because you get this objective experience of your own practice when you see yourself on video, and it's easier to make corrections. So like in the studio, when I tell somebody like their downward facing dog is too short, they have to subjectively feel what's happening in their bodies. When I show them a video of it, it becomes apparent right away. So the tools that we can use as coaches online to help people better their practice, honestly, make video a superior way to teach. So I'm super excited about this.
I completely agree. So, okay, we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the online thing in a minute. Let's talk specifically about movement, not only just movement. People who have been hanging out with me for a while know that I'm like, I guess if you've got to run or swim or whatever, you do you. But really, I firmly believe that yoga is not only the ideal movement for the human body and being fit and being strong and being flexible, but really that yoga is the perfect movement for something like helping us complete the stress response cycle and really process something like anxious energy, give us a conscious way to move. It gives us a conscious way to breathe, which is a huge part of anxiety. So let's talk a little bit about yoga and anxiety and how these two relate. And maybe you can lend some credibility to me always being on the soapbox of yoga for anxiety.
Absolutely. I think a simplification of it is that yoga is at its core mind-body exercise. And that's not based upon the idea that we have to stay present while we move. It's based upon the idea that the mind and body are not two separate things, but they're one. So nerve cells are long brain cells. We don't think up here in our heads, we think throughout our entire body. And I think we all know this on an intuitive level. We know that when we feel stress mentally and emotionally, it manifests somehow physically. Me, for example, it shows up in the muscles of my neck or in the muscles of my face. And yoga recognized that in some way, there's like a two-way feed going on there, where we can manifest it physically, but if we can de-stress physically, it's also going to have a powerful impact mentally and emotionally. So the work that we do in yoga isn't just working on our physical bodies, but as we lengthen and strengthen tissues, we're actually working on our personalities as well. And in the beginning, for most people, when they hear that, that sounds like some very bizarre idea. But once you experience that, it just becomes this truth that you no longer doubt. So I've always been a little bit on the vanguard when it comes to movement, like right at the spear. That's what I'm interested in, like, being in the cutting edge of what we can do with movement to heal ourselves. I'm not the scientist in the lab who's going to tell you how those two things interrelate. All I can tell you is after, 20 plus years of doing a practice myself, I am radically transformed. And what I do on my mat impacts who I am as a whole person. And I think if people really understood the power that they have to transform themselves mentally, emotionally, and spiritually through movement, everybody would be doing this. It's like you and I agree on this so much, I know, but it's like having this secret that nobody knows. Like having this secret formula of movements. Just do this sequence. If you do this, it will change your life. But, of course, it sounds like we're trying to sell them something, but like, my God, that's exactly what it does. And CrossFit won't do that, and running won't do that. There's an endorphin release you're going to get from those things, much like taking some sort of medication. It's going to wear off. But the impacts we get from yoga, they're life-changing and they're lifelong.
I completely agree. And like you said, it does sometimes sound like,
Yeah.
well, of course you're going to sell yoga. Of course that's what you're into. Why this
Mhm.
over something else? But and I have never had the experience. And you tell me if you've ever had the experience. I've never, when I was teaching yoga, daily, I never had anybody come to the studio who was like, I just think yoga is going to help me, you know, be a better person or become the personality that I think I want to be.
Mhm.
That most people don't associate the practice of yoga with becoming the kind of person, the highest level version of themselves. Right.
Right.
But we've watched it happen over and over and
Right.
over again. Yes.
It's like a journey of discovery. I mean, you can start for whatever reason you want. I tell people this all the time. It could be because you want better abs or you want to touch your toes. It doesn't matter. Somewhere along the way, if you practice consistently over a long enough period of time, you have discoveries that prove from your own experience that this transforms who you are in the world. And it's echoed by the people in your lives. I mean, I can't tell you, I've never understood this. It seems like women have always taken a leadership role in the practice. Every studio I've ever been to, mine included, definitely has a majority of practitioners who are women. But I tell you what, a lot of those women are married. And I often wonder because I always hear stories about the husbands encouraging their wives to practice when they can tell they're stressed out. So they're picking up that there is this correlation between the movements they're doing and their state of mind. But what it still I don't understand is why then they don't conclude, well, then maybe I should do this. Sooner or later, you'd think they'd figure that out, right? Clearly, something's working for you. You need to do it. But like, yeah, maybe I should too. But
Right. Right. That's so funny. That is a good point. And you're right. I think on a subtle level, like it's almost subconscious that we see the transformations in people, you
mhm,
know, or that the people in our lives pick up on the transformations in us, right?
mhm.
And they somehow connect the dots, but I don't know if people are consciously like, maybe if I did yoga too, I could make that kind of change in my life, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I don't know. There's a gap there, but I mean,
Yeah. We'll keep
I'm with
working on
you.
it.
I think if there was a handbook on how to care and maintain for the human body and the human experience, it would be called yoga. I really do believe that. And Adamantine Yoga may not be for everybody, but I do think in some ways it's the most appropriate, effective, empowering way to do it for the modern person. And that's been largely the work that I've done, is to kind of translate this discipline that evolved over thousands of years into terms that modern people can find accessible and authentic and empowering.
Yes. Yes. I love it. I love it. So I talk, of course, with people a lot about managing their mind and giving them tools for cleaning up their mind, getting into their mindset and understanding what the heck's even going on in there. And have always said like that's one angle to come at anxiety from, right? Like you can look at it from the angle of mindset and what's going on in your mind. What are you constantly thinking about? What are you worrying about? What are you ruminating about? And it's a really powerful way. And I think for most people, the tools of life coaching and the idea of managing our mind is the newest thing. right? Most people know I should be exercising, I should be eating well, I
Mm-hmm.
need to get good sleep. Those are not revolutionary ideas. Coaching is kind of revolutionary for people. These are not things that anybody pulls us aside in high school and says, hey, good job with the Shakespeare and the algebra. Now I want to tell you how to actually create a life you want to live. So that's been very exciting. And that is, of
Mm-hmm.
course, the work that I do day in and day out with people. But I also firmly believe, and I know that you're a living example of this, that yoga is an equally powerful angle to come at our emotions and transformation from. And that it's like,
Yes.
which modality do you want to use today? Do you want to look at your thoughts and inquire there, or do you want to go on the mat? Most days, I would say 99% of the time, of course, I'm using both.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about your journey through, how have you used yoga and what have you noticed specifically emotionally and with anxiety
Mm-hmm.
as it's a transformative tool and another angle to come at it from?
Well, the first thing that hits me when you ask that or you lead into this is the idea that if you don't do the work in your body, I wonder if we can ever really manifest complete freedom in ourselves. I just think it can't be neglected. Posture is such a description of state of mind. So, I think about, someone who, carries their posture in such a way that their shoulders roll forward and, their eyes are down, that kind of inward, almost like depressive kind of posture. I don't know if talk therapy alone would ever heal that unless you open the body back up. And there's such a connection there. I know that makes sense to you. I don't know that that'll make sense to everybody, but there's such a connection between posture and state of mind that if you neglect the body, I'm not sure if you could ever fully emerge from that. Now, to go directly to your question, um, I have never spoken publicly about this. Okay, and I thought today speaking with you is probably the right time because it's part of my story, and I have had a diagnosable anxiety disorder myself since I was in my late 20s. I'm 48 years old, and it got severe enough at one point that I experienced, agoraphobia. And I know a lot about anxiety, put it that way. And I think that it's a function of me being a highly sensitive individual, an introvert by nature, and a creative. And I think when we tend to focus inside of ourselves and we're creative, we can come up with all kinds of what ifs in every situation we find ourselves in that cause all kinds of havoc in our lives. And I think for the most part, I found myself drawn to the tools and techniques of yoga and diet and lifestyle modification as a means of self therapy, of healing myself. And that's how I use yoga. I use yoga to de-stress myself, to quiet my own mind. And I honestly cannot imagine life without a tool like this. Um, the type of person I am without the right diet, without adequate sleep, without a consistent daily dedicated yoga practice, I would really struggle.
Yes. Yes. And as James said, he's never talked about this publicly, and he hasn't even really talked about this privately, like in the safe sanctuary of like a yoga teacher training or anything. This was news to me today. Um,
Right.
and I'm
I
thrilled that you're
can.
sharing this because I think this is something that people need to hear, especially people who are struggling with anxiety, who
Mhm.
think there isn't a way out. I've been doing all of the things, right? I'm eating right. I'm going to a therapist. I'm sleeping, and still I'm not transforming this. There isn't, I haven't been able to unlock this. And I know for you, similarly to me, like yoga has been no small part of helping me become the version of myself I knew that I could be, but I didn't have a
Mhm.
tool before yoga in order to unlock. kind of like what you said. We both are, we're similar in the ways of that perfect storm of very introverted, creative,
Mm-hmm.
little control freakiness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that those are necessarily personality qualities that are going to go away. Those might be personality qualities of just who I am. And, what you said is very true. I've been very private about this because for years it was something that, I mean, I'm a former Marine. That just doesn't fit that archetype at all. And it was part of who I am that I hid. Um, and in some ways, you could say it was because I was embarrassed by it. So I think you know me well enough to agree with the fact that I'm probably the highest functioning agoraphobic person you'll ever meet. But the reason that's true is because I have all of these tools and techniques and I use them on a daily basis because that creativity hasn't gone away. I mean, if I put myself in certain environments, absolutely, I start to have those what if thoughts. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it becomes so real to me that my body responds. But like I said, my practice is almost an opportunity daily to kind of rehearse that way of feeling and to remain in a state of mindfulness. And I work with a coach myself.
Yes.
There's somebody I talk to about this that helps me, rein it in and look at the patterns that I still need to work on. But I feel like it's important to share this with you and with your audience because it's a way of just kind of connecting their experience to the things that I've discovered for me allow me to thrive. Because honestly, probably a handful of people in my life before this conversation are even aware of this. It hasn't stopped me from traveling all over the world and presenting on yoga and taking on speaking engagements in front of tons of people and doing some of the things that I've managed to do while still being the type of person that at my core tends to be anxious.
And you bring up a really, really interesting point, and I think this is important to underscore here. It's something else that I talk a lot about. Our goal here, the reason it's called the Transforming Anxiety Podcast and not the Get Rid of Anxiety
Mm-hmm.
Podcast, is that you and I and everybody that I know who has kind of like figured out the mechanisms and uses the consistent tools and who's very conscious about transforming their lives. The goal is not to get rid of anxiety, right? Like we kind of, it sounds like you two have accepted that anxiety is going to come along for the ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is just kind of part of the package. But you wanted to be the person you wanted to be. And so it was a matter of what am I going to put into place so that, yeah, I may be anxious, right? I may feel certain emotions. I may feel certain fears or there may even be like, without the tools, I may have felt limited. I may have felt a little stuck. But because I've, taken care of myself, I'm eating well, I'm sleeping well, I'm moving
Mm-hmm.
my body, and I know how to manage my mind. I know exactly what anxiety is. I know that nothing has gone wrong here. Everything is okay. And I can do this anyway, even with the feeling of anxiety, right? That doesn't
Right.
have to be the stop. That can be the like, all right, we're going to come along for the ride. It's all
Right.
just part of the package.
Right. I think it's taken me a long time. And I think that this conversation today is really just an example of it to learn to embrace myself and love myself as I am, and to recognize that those of us that experience things like anxiety, I mean, this sounds crazy when you first hear it, but there's positives and negatives. In some ways, the hypersensitivity that I experience is like a superpower. And the creativity has allowed
Yes.
me to create things like Adamantine. And I wouldn't give that up for anything in the world. But it also
Yes.
makes me hyper aware of things that other people don't pay any attention to. And there was a time in my life when I kind of pushed this part of me away. And that's when I was in the Marine Corps and I was tight and toxic. And I look at the years before that when I was a child, a highly sensitive kid,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then the years afterwards, and I think yoga helped me reveal that person again. And for that reason, I really look at who I am as a whole person, and am still to this day attempting to accept the darker side of those qualities because we want all the good, but we don't want the bad. I want
Yeah,
the creativity and the imagination. I want that sensitivity to feel this wide range of emotions, but I don't want them when I don't want them. And
sure.
it just doesn't work that way. So it's almost like I have to take care of myself like I would somebody else,
Hmm.
and in the best way possible. And it's taken me a long time to get there.
Yes. I think it's a path we're consistently on forever. I mean, this is probably for the long haul,
Right,
right? Like,
right.
I think you're right. There is no finish line to yoga where we're like, okay, I can do scorpion and I don't feel anxious anymore. Like, got that taken care
Right.
of. That's not the goal. We work on scorpion, we work on the splits, we work on the back bends. Some days it's amazing, some days it's a hot mess, but it's
Hmm.
like, along the way, we work on the anxiety, we work on the stress, we work on all of those what if ruminations. Some days it's a hot mess, some days it's pretty amazing. And you know, just really accepting that all of this is part of the whole. We're not trying to get rid of any of it. And I'm even kind of like playing with this myself with emotions, that we tend to like label some emotions as bad, like you said, and
Hmm.
some emotions as good. And I'm really like marinating in this concept of like, what if they're all just emotions,
Hmm.
right? What if it's like the fear is there for a purpose, the anger is there for a purpose, the grief is there for a purpose, just like the joy, just like the excitement, just like the contentment. And that it's all, we have these cycles in life. We have, you get hungry, so you eat, and then you're full. And then you get hungry again, so you eat again. You get tired, so you rest. We go through those cycles. We go through the different seasons. Like, I think emotionally, if we could treat them as cycles too, and that it's like
Right.
sometimes this is just along for the ride, right?
It's almost like the weather. It just kind of passes. And sometimes you're just taking stock. Oh, this is what's going on today. I think, one of the core teachings of yoga is the discovery of who we really are at our core. And, what you discover through mindfulness meditation or through a practice like Adamantine Yoga is that at our core, what we really are is pure consciousness. So if we can remain present to whatever the weather is today, whatever emotions are
Yes.
coming along, we experience our life in different ways. It's when we attach to these things, that's when we suffer.
Right. Right. And that's so much of the work that I do with one-on-one clients is that story that we have about it, right? And I've
Right.
seen people do this in yoga too, and I've wondered if we had a conversation about like the story that you have about like not being able to do shoulder roll, or the story that
Hmm.
you have about how scary handstand is. Like, what if we were to look at that story and the narrative that you have about this pose and really break down how you're thinking about it and keep practicing, the physical manifestation of it? Like, it's the perfect combination of things, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah.
And I think one thing that can really help your listeners is to understand that we can talk about this, as teachers, people who've experienced it, but at the same time, in no way does it say we've mastered anything. Like we're doing the same work when we show up on the mat every day. We're trying to return to that place of pure consciousness and witness, okay, this is what's happening physically, and this is what's happening in my breath today, and this is what's happening emotionally. I'm trying my best to organize those things, but in the midst of that storm of everything on the surface, there I am, just pure witness consciousness. I can talk all I want about it, but I still fall victim to identifying with the storm, all the time, and that's why
All
it's a
the time.
practice. It's a lifetime practice.
Yes. No, I completely agree. And I think part of the superpower that, not knowing this about you, now it all kind of makes sense, right?
Hmm.
There's something that you lend as a yoga teacher, that ability to read a room and the
Hmm.
ability to read somebody's emotions as they're walking into that a room and meet them where they're at, because you're sensitive to it, because you're attuned to it, because you've experienced it. That's the whole other thing than just opening the studio and being like, yep, we're here to move our bodies. Come on in.
Right.
Right.
It's difficult. I mean, people that are empathic, when you read people so well and you pick up their emotions, it's a struggle. That's a struggle. And that's one of the reasons I find it, I don't know what your listeners experience or what type of anxiety. And I don't even know how many types there are. All I know is my subjective experience of it. But I know that it's magnified when I'm around a lot of other people. That's really difficult for me. And that's because I find that for whatever reason, I read people so well that being in a group of them is just overwhelming. So for that reason, I find I do my best work by myself. I have no idea how people function in crowded open office environments. I would get nothing done. Um,
Yes.
Maybe people can identify.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that it speaks to the power of yoga. It speaks to the power of what you're teaching because it's not just about the poses. So many people show up to yoga or think they have the concept of yoga that it's all about being bendy. And
Mhm.
that's like not even it's the icing
It's
on the cake maybe. I don't know. Like it's
right.
not even a
It's a
part of it.
beautiful trick. It's like this
Right?
beautiful trick that's being played on people because you can come for those things, but the beautiful thing is that on the other side of it, the transformation still occurs. I
Yes.
think that's amazing.
Yes. I agree. I agree. Come for the abs, come to be able to touch your toes and
Yeah, fantastic.
great.
And it's going to happen anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit then and tell us this is the most exciting announcement. Well, for me, it's the most exciting announcement ever in the world of
I
adamantine.
suppose, yeah, because you don't live locally. This is a big deal, right?
It's so fun.
Yeah.
So adamantine has been a local, in real life, in person, come to the studio experience thus far. And there are a handful of us who are scattered around, just geography, people have moved, whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about what's shifting and what's changing and why we're doing this podcast. Because all my
Well,
people are not in Des Moines, right?
my hope is, and I think we both agree, we've really got something here. Adamantine is, to me, the best way to practice yoga. I think you would agree. Um,
100%.
right. And
100%.
in some ways, my hope is, and who knows if this will ever happen, it's going to be that brand new thing on the scene that's actually been around for about 10 years. Okay. We've been percolating and working with this practice for 10 years in a studio environment. And I think now it's really ready to reach out and empower people all over the globe. And I had this epiphany about a year ago where I began to realize that the problems that people are facing when practicing yoga at home is the very same problems I work to solve in yoga studios, which is the one size fits all approach doesn't really help people. So when people go online and follow some YouTube video or a Yoga Glow video or something like this, it's really not designed for them. So what I've done is create a course that's going to empower people in their homes to individualize the Adamantine yoga practice and then give them a community and give them a coach to really help them flourish. That's our goal. So we've been building this over the past 2 years. About a year and a half ago, we rolled out what was called the Foundations course. That's basically the reference tool in Adamantine yoga. Then we created a community, the Adamantine yoga movement. And now the big news is on January 5th, we're launching a basic training for the first time ever. It's a 7-week program that's going to empower people at home who have never practiced Adamantine yoga before to be able to do the practice for themselves independently, no matter where they are. It's a big deal.
It's so exciting.
Mhm.
It's so exciting. And I know um, the majority of you who are listening are not familiar with adamantine yoga. Um, I think that's perfect. I think that's the best. Like that's the hope is, this style of yoga, the way that this style of yoga works and the infrastructure that it now has with the community aspect and the coaching aspect and not only the videos kind of like what people are used to of like here's how you do it, but
Mhm.
also the back and forth of videos of like, well, here's how I did
Mhm.
it. Now let's talk with a coach and see, like you said, when you tell somebody how to move their body in space and time and you're having a conversation with them, it's a very rare person who can see in their head exactly what you're talking about, even for something as
Mhm.
simple as like lengthening their down dog and scooting their feet back 2 inches. That's
Mhm.
a rare person who has that capacity to see themselves in space and time that way. When you see it on video and you pause and you say, okay, do you see this down dog? What if you were to move your feet back 2 inches? And then you have them experiment with that. And then you have them show or shoot that video and send it in. And they can feel it and they can see it. Like that's a transformational tool.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah, and
huge.
we've experimented with enough already to know exactly how well it works. We've got people already doing this process themselves at home. This is the first time we're kind of reaching out to a bigger audience to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So part of the reason that we wanted to get together and do this and have this conversation today, it's something that I talk about with my audience and with my clients ad nauseum to the point where they're probably exhausted of it. But I am so excited to have a tool to offer them like this is the thing to do. If you've been wondering how to incorporate movement, if you've been wondering, okay, she tells me all the time that really completing the stress response cycle looks like moving my body every day. But aside from walking, I don't know what to do. This is the thing to do, right? It's so fun to be able to just like plug and play and be like, here you go. It's so awesome.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad we could provide it for you and
Yes.
for your listeners. This is great. Yeah.
Selfishly, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, to me and my audience, this is what we've been waiting for. So, okay, as you mentioned, it launches January 5th,
Right.
2020. So by the time this goes live, I'm going to let's say this is live January 3rd or so, I'm hoping that people are going to get online and they're going to be able to find out a little bit more about it. I will link everything in the show notes and I'll have emails coming out and everything. But tell us a little bit where to find more information for people who want it right now.
Well, you can find more information generally at adamantineyoga.com. There's a little bit of my story on there, and there is a wait list. But I think that people, if they do enroll through you, are going to get some kind of special discount. So, like, I would probably follow up with whatever Kelly offers you because it's going to be a much better deal.
Yes.
But you can definitely find out general information at adamantineyoga.com.
Great. Great.
Mhm.
And like James hinted at, there is going to be a deep discount for those of you who are listening, for those of you who are in my orbit and have been listeners of the podcast who are on my email list. I will be sending all of that information out to you, and there will be links in the show notes. This is a discount. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you're going to be giving again. This is like a one
No.
and done introductory offer.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's really, I mean, it's quite the deal for what we're delivering. We have such a great,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, and of course that goes without saying, we would say that, but we have a group, just an amazing group of teachers, yourself included, who are supporting this process. So, yeah, it, to me, you'd be silly not to do this. If you're interested in yoga at all or in taking care of yourself at all, this is the best way to do it. And this is definitely the time to sign up. By the way, we only offer a basic training like this. We're only going to do this once a year. We're
Yes.
only going to do it, at this time of the year, as the year begins. We're going to enroll one group and that's it. So we won't be doing this again until 2021.
That's right. So we're going to be able to take great care of this introductory group of people. We're going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to coach them and really guide them through. And this is whether you have done a whole bunch of yoga, that's great. If you've never done yoga, that's great. There is nothing that you need coming into this program aside from an internet connection and a yoga mat, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And a
Truthfully.
willingness to go up on your mat. That's it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We would love it if consistency is key. If you didn't catch that earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consistency is going to be a big part of this, but truly you don't need anything other than an internet connection and a yoga mat. And use a beach towel if you don't have a yoga mat. Who cares, right?
Right.
You
Right.
really don't need anything.
I say this in different parts of the course, but I'm a former Marine. I know how hard a basic training can be. This is a 7-week basic training program. It's not going to kick your butt like the Marine Corps basic training did. But if you decide to do this, I'm speaking to any of you as listeners out there, like this is something to lean into because this could transform the year 2020. And we want to take the stories of the types of transformations that people have over the next year and help empower people in 2021 to do the same work. So we're really looking to support the people who joined this initial program.
Yeah. Yeah. A quick short story from my life about starting Adamantine Yoga. I can remember I went up to Des Moines for a quick weekend immersion and I
Mm-hmm.
learned the whole Adamantine Yoga sequence in 2 days. We did 2 days worth of learning the choreography. And then one of James' famous lines is, okay, let's just see how this goes, right? Let's see
Mm-hmm.
what happens. And so anyway, there were a group of us that were brand new to this style. And I can remember coming home. I drove home Sunday night and I wake up Monday morning and I go down to the basement. I had a little yoga studio in my basement at that time where we lived. And I was in the habit of watching a yoga DVD every morning and putting myself through the paces because that's what I did. And I can remember standing in the middle of the room thinking, okay, I just learned this new wild thing. If I don't do it today, am I going to do it? Right? Like, am I going to return to it? Well, it's fresh. I just came home. I'm all excited about it. Should I just put in the DVD and guide me, do what I've always been doing? Why don't I just try this for a month? And I told myself that I'm just going to do this every day for a month and I'm going to see what happens. And if I love it, great. And if I don't love it, the yoga DVDs are always going to be there. No big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
literally haven't turned back. That was, to the best of my guess, sometime in either late 2012 or early 2013. And so I've been practicing this way every single day since then. And it
Wow.
has changed my life. I really can remember that moment of just like, what do I want to do here?
Mm-hmm.
Am I all in? Could I commit to this for a month? So I just invite you, like, give us 7 weeks, really. And if
Mm-hmm.
at the end of it, it's not for you, fine. But I challenge you to go through these 7 weeks and commit. If you go all in for 7 weeks, I challenge you to come out the other side not a better person, not a different person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I don't think I could say that better myself. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Great. Well, James, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for allowing this. I feel like this is an exclusive.
Mm.
It's like an exclusive James interview. But really, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your time and your passion with us. I'm so excited to invite my listeners and my audience into the world of Adamantine Yoga. And like James said, I am one of the teachers. So if you want to work
Mhm.
with me, I could be your coach with
That's
yoga.
pretty awesome.
Could
Yeah.
be fun, right?
Mm.
So, again, all of the links and information will be coming out. It will all be in the show notes. I will have it on the website, so we will make it very easy. You can always email me if you have any questions. I will get back to you personally, each and every one of you, if you have any questions about the program. But we can't wait to invite you in to basic training January 5th, 2020, Adamantine Yoga.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Awesome.
much for having me on your podcast today. It was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you, James.